Hello, and you are listening to EcoJustice Radio on KPFK Los Angeles and KPFT Houston, a project of SoCal 350 Climate Action. Our show presents environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame, featuring voices not necessarily heard on mainstream media. Welcome, I am Jessica Aldridge. On today's show, Indigenous Regeneration, Remembering the Past to Inspire the Future. Host Carrie Kim will be interviewing Lacey Cannon, founder and executive director of Indigenous Re-generation, based out of San Diego County, California. Lacey Cannon is from the Cherokee Nation and is the founder and executive director for Indigenous Regeneration. Lacey was married into the Waipuk Clan on the San Pasqual Reservation of the Kumeyaay Nation for 17 years and has 2 Kumeyaay sons from the clan. Lacey has overseen and designed 17 acres of educational land restoration projects on the San Pasqual Indian Reservation. Her regenerative design work with Payam Elder Richard Bugbee is a featured exhibit at the Museum of Design in Atlanta, Georgia through summer 2022. Aloha, this is Carrie Kim. Listeners, mahalo for being with us today. Lacey Cannon, founder and executive director of Indigenous Regeneration, joins us to discuss the ways her nonprofit org is inspiring Native communities on regenerative ways of living through food cultivation, medicinal farming, culture, and eco-village education programs, all as a means to re-indigenize and embody tribal sovereignty. We thank the Tongva ancestors for their continuing presence, legacy, and stewardship of this area as our show comes to you from the ancestral lands of the Tongva. We encourage all listeners to align with and support local First Nations wherever you are in their continued stewardship. Regeneration continues to gain momentum globally as more human beings awaken to the urgent state of the planet. A clear choice lies before us to either unite and reconnect to the lands, waters, relatives, and ancestors, or face greater peril, physically, socially, economically, and spiritually. Many people say we are all indigenous to somewhere. The times demand that we find out how to belong to the land again. At Indigenous Regeneration, the old way is the new way in the journey to foster intertribal connectivity, personal and collective healing, food and tribal sovereignty. Indigenous peoples once lived in harmony with the lands, waters, and all life, but we now live in an unprecedented time, requiring restoration of degraded lands and biodiversity, as well as the healing of our own spirit, being witness to the outcomes and consequences of colonization and our modern consumerist, anthropocentric lifestyles. We can regenerate ourselves and manifest the harmonious and creative world of our dreams. We're grateful to have Lacey Cannon on the show today to share how Indigenous Regeneration is dreaming in the future by empowering the present. Welcome, Lacey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Many thanks for joining us on the show. We had to chase you around the globe, but you're finally here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Could you first introduce listeners? You are, we know, of the Cherokee Nation, but live on the San Pasqual Reservation, which is Kumeyaay lands. And I was wondering if you could introduce to the listeners a little bit more of the Kumeyaay, as your work is largely cited there. The territory, just a little back history.
Yeah, well, what I can share is, my children are from the Waipuk Clan of San Pasqual Reservation, which is part of the Kumeyaay Nation. I no longer live on the reservation with them. I live about 10 minutes off at a new farm site that is currently serving 40 families weekly on San Pasqual. I can't speak specifically for the Kumeyaay Nation, but I can speak specifically for the work that we do within the nation. And I'm really excited to share about that.
So regeneration has been the buzzword for a while now. And if you could explain why the name Indigenous Regeneration.
Yeah, well, that name to me means a shift that takes place in the way that we think about things. So it's not necessarily specific to a specific land as much as it's more about how we think about things in our daily life. Are we thinking on a linear way? Are we thinking about cycles? And so Indigenous regeneration is really about coming into an awareness of thinking about life and our environment and our relationships with human and self in a different way. And when we do that, there's a regeneration that takes place. It takes place within our souls, it takes place within our relationships, and it takes place within the land around us. So I was hoping that would speak to that.
You began Indigenous Regeneration, or IRG, and you founded it in 2017. Could you share the backstory of those humble beginnings and how the vision and manifestation began?
Sure. Well, so at the time I was married to a Kumeyaay man for 17 years, and he's from the San Pasqual Reservation. And we at one point had decided to move back to the reservation to raise our kids there. So it was a decision of having heard stories from him about what it was like growing up on the reservation and the types of programs and things that were available to him. And also him being a lighter skinned Kumeyaay and what he experienced. And so when we moved there and we built our house, I really wanted my kids to have access to be able to meet their cousins and learn about culture and have a space, even though they were even more light skinned than my ex-husband. And so it started out as let's do a community garden. We had been in philanthropy for a long time, in the music business, and had made a lot of beautiful connections in philanthropy. And it was kind of like, how can we give back now, moving back to the reservation? So it was birthed from that space. And the community garden, it started as a community garden, but then it just grew into something quite a bit larger really quickly. And that had a lot to do with bringing on a lot of really wonderful elders in our community onto the board of directors. And just allowing things to expand based on the vision and the need from the direct community, and finding out what did our community actually need and want. And so we pulled together all the resources from all of our connections with philanthropy. And honestly, we threw a benefit concert with Nako, my friend Nako, and raised the funds to launch it. And I didn't know anything about starting a nonprofit. I honestly Googled it. The concert raised like $3,000 or something. And I was like, okay, it's enough to file the paperwork. And I Googled how to start a nonprofit. And that was the beginning. And then, I wrote the bylaws and just took a few months forming things. And the tribe leased us 6 acres of land for 5 years for $1 a month. And we partnered with the education department at the tribe and the environmental department at the tribe. And kind of at the same time that it was blooming and all of it was happening, the USDA NRCS contracts came about that we found out about. And that was money to put in native plants. And so that was when I just saw an opportunity to create community spaces that were designed with Richard Bugbee, where we designed it from a place of revitalizing the native plant palette in the area and kind of fixing up the ecosystem, and then also providing jobs on the reservation while we did it. So some of the projects that we did together that included the NRCS contracts were the Elder's Medicine Path, where it's a path that's forageable by wheelchair, all the traditional medicines. A constructed wetlands that we did with all of the traditional awa, the house and boat making materials. A riparian basket weavers trail with all the traditional basket weaving materials.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. We did a Kumeyaay food forest. What was it like to forage pre-colonization? And altogether, I think
is based on their native foods, bringing back some of their native foods, or decolonized kind of food.
Yeah, absolutely. So Indigenous regeneration really stands behind food sovereignty. And when we talk about that, we talk about really changing our perspective of what is food sovereignty. Because yes, we can grow organic food and have more access to fresh foods. But really, if we're looking at climate change, we have to shift how we perceive food. And San Diego and Southern California is such a rich plant palette. The desert has so much food and medicine in it, but we don't look at these things as food. And so what's going to withstand droughts? What's going to be able to last long term, if something does happen, and how do we strengthen those food systems? And so we put on a lot of native plants that are going to be good for food and medicine if something does happen.
And were those native plants to the Kumeyaay? Plants that were traditionally in their diet? I don't know what the story is as far as, the seeds, whether some of the seeds are, whether you're able to find some of the seeds of those foods anymore, or what the status is.
So there's a lot of traditional foods. I mean, pretty much the native plant palette to each area is the traditional foods. So San Diego has chia seeds. The seeds of sage can be eaten. There's the yucca plant where the heart can be roasted. There's the blossoms that come off of the stalk that taste like squash blossoms.
Mm-hmm.
You have manzanita berries that can be ground up into a coffee-like beverage. It's fun. It's fun to find out what kind of things you can make with the native foods and how they were prepared, and to hear from the different aunties and uncles the stories about how their parents or their grandparents did it. And you learn different ways, and that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing the journey, how, 5 years, right? In 5 years, but it probably feels like much longer than that, I imagine. Because you have the pandemic.
Still learning, but I've definitely learned a lot.
You underwent your own journey to reconnect to the source of foods and heal yourself. I was wondering if you could share a little bit of how that journey has informed IRG, Indigenous Regeneration, just in general. I mean, I'm sure it's just kind of a subtext there, just there, even if it's not really in your conscious mind, but it's part of you, right? That journey that you underwent.
Yeah, I forgot I had shared about that, but
that's on one of your videos.
Yeah. Well, when I was 25 years old and I had a 1-year-old, I was 25 and I had a 1-year-old son. I was 250 pounds and I was diagnosed with mesenteric adenitis, proctitis, diverticulitis,
wow,
internal hemorrhoids, and precancerous polyps. And I was told that I was going to have to wear one of the bags on the outside of my body.
Oh, awesome. Mm-hmm.
And so that for me, I went gluten-free at that time. And then that kind of, I had a repeat colonoscopy a year later of being gluten-free, and everything inside of my intestines had healed. Mm-hmm. And so that was when I really connected to, food is medicine and it matters what we put in our body. And at the same time had become friends with Rich Roll and his wife, Julie. And he's a plant-based triathlete, and she is an amazing vegan chef and cheesemaker here in LA. And they just really opened me up to a plant-based diet and a vegan lifestyle for a long time. And so I went through raw food diet things and just exploring with food and what felt good for my body, lost 100 pounds, and just got into a more optimal space with my health. And so that's when I became really passionate about what we put in our body, and then also practicing yoga and breath and meditation and positive affirmations. And those things really turned my life around. And so when we moved back to the reservation, I just really noticed that there was high levels of diabetes, there was high levels of obesity, and there wasn't a lot of options for organic fresh vegetables. It's kind of a food desert, and many people shop at gas stations, that are within a 5-mile radius of the reservation.
Right. And then the economics of it as well, right?
Absolutely.
So what has changed bringing these foods in, and with the community garden that was originally started, what are the changes that you've seen as far as people's physical health? Because obviously I don't know if everyone who's living there receives a box from the garden, or how food is distributed from that garden. But I'm wondering what kinds of specific changes you've seen in people's health, because we do know, we are what we eat. Our consciousness is, of course, directly impacted by the things we put in our body.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I have stories that I get to hear every week, which is really fun. So on Thursdays, we do the food distributions down on the corner by the reservation. And we serve in between 20 and 40 families, depending on how much produce we have that week. We're partnered with a few other organizations like Produce Good, where they glean from orchards that aren't being gleaned, and then they donate to us. We're starting to receive more and more donations and growing the program. But when I'm there, I get to talk to the aunties and the uncles. And even though I'm divorced now, it's kind of like my time to catch up with family, because they've been my family for so long.
Yes. Yeah.
And so a couple of weeks back, I had a great visit with one of the aunties, and she was saying that her and her husband had been struggling with hives. And they had tried everything. I mean, they had tried medications, all kinds of weird things, but they were both just having some serious health issues and gut issues. And she said, just from adding in the weekly, they haven't changed anything else, but just adding in the vegetables. And because they have it every single week, they're experimenting with different recipes, and they're eating things they normally wouldn't eat. that they had gotten rid of the hives, that they both had lost, I think, 10 pounds, and that they were like really excited that they were feeling a lot better when they ate those.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really interesting to hear.
Well, how do you, I don't know how many families actually live there, because you say you can feed, anywhere from 20 to 40 families. Like, is there a rotation to make sure that other people, get a chance to receive the foods if it doesn't cover the entire, all of the families that live there? Maybe all of the families aren't actually wanting to sign up. I don't know how it actually works.
Both are true. We kind of have the same group of families that rotate through. The same group of families that would come out to our programming and get involved in things are typically the same ones that show up and want the vegetables. Not everybody wants it. We do first come, first serve. So sometimes we have a line and it gets kind of passed around. So, and then sometimes people will take extra boxes and they'll go drop them off to new neighbors and spread the word of what we're doing, But there's a few thousand people on the reservation. So it's something that we're really trying to actually scale so that we could serve more families.
Right. It's amazing. I mean, you originally leased that 6 acres. I don't know what you're on now, or if you're still kind of working within that 6 acres, or if it's expanded quite a bit further than that.
Well, with Kumeyaay, we came to the end of our 5-year lease, and really, the goal of Indigenous Regeneration is to create working models for tribes to feel inspired and take over. And then for us to be able to come in and help with resources and funding and, different things for them. And so that working model kind of came to its close, and it's been given back as of March 17th to the tribe for them to take over and continue on with that site. And we have a secondary site that's 10 minutes down the road, which is Paradise Farms. Okay. And that's where we're running our tribal farm apprenticeship program out of, and where we have access to more water to be able to farm. Kumeyaay is a beautiful community gathering space. It also struggled, though, with a dry well. So it wasn't ideal for production farming.
Food, I see.
It's good for teaching, and we have the food forest there, and it can grow enough in the pizza garden, which is where the kids, have all the toppings for their pizzas and stuff. And we have a pizza oven we built on site, and pizza parties. So
that was like the key factor there. I get it. Did you have any prior experience? I mean, what was your background going into this as far as farming, permaculture, regenerative practices? When you began, like you said, you didn't know how to start a nonprofit or run a nonprofit, but here you were. So what kind of background did you have in regeneration at all at that time?
Well, I actually grew up in potato fields with my mom. She was a potato farmer, and she worked with migrant workers on the island where I'm from. And so my kindergarten bus dropped me off in the potato fields. And so I started in the dirt young, and my first job at 12 was at the Hummingbird Farm. It was a flower farm where we harvested and dried flowers for dried flower arrangements for Nordstrom's in Seattle. Then I worked at a nursery on the island where I was from, and just a handful of different, gardening jobs until I was 19, and I took a organic farm apprenticeship position for a year at the Rosehip Farm and Garden, where I lived on site above in the barn, and I trained under, she's passed now, but she was my first teacher, which was Linda. And she trained me in organic farming there. And mostly we grew a lot of garlic, which was hung in the barn where I lived above. So you can imagine in July what smelly garlic smells like when you're living above the barn. And then it was when I had lost touch for a chunk of years with, having my hands in the earth and stuff. And we had pursued the music business for a long time. And so I was in that for a while. And when we moved back to the reservation, I was pregnant. I started gardening in the backyard and just being out there barefoot and squatting and preparing myself for birth. And I really connected with it. And that was kind of what sparked it, of not wanting to go back and work in corporate and marketing. So I went to school for marketing and business, and I just wasn't wanting to go back into an office. I wanted to be with my kids. I wanted to be on the land. I wanted to do something important that I was passionate about, that involved the community, that still gave my partner a platform for his music. It was a combination of things.
Right. Yeah. It all led to one thing to another. Would you say that we could substitute the word reclaiming for Indigenous regeneration? Do you see reclaiming language as a primary key to regeneration for Native peoples?
I think that language is fundamental in reclaiming indigeneity because it really speaks to English as a backwards language. Everything about it forms our brain in a certain way. And so learning our native language allows us to, one, pray in it, which I think is really important, and also be able to connect to our ancestors that spoke that language. Mm-hmm. So there's something that happens when you start to practice your language. It ignites the soul in a different kind of a way. And my dream is to dream in any language other than English.
I hear you. Well, I think maybe if you were, well, there's also Old English and all these different, how it used to be with it was a very different language, right? How it's stripped down over time. But Lacey, we're going to take a break right here and we'll come right back to speak more about Indigenous regeneration.
Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying EcoJustice Radio. We air every Monday at 9 a.m. on KPFT Houston and every Wednesday at 3 p.m. on KPFK Los Angeles. Stay connected by subscribing to EcoJustice Radio on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media. For an extended version of this interview as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. Today, you are listening to Indigenous Regeneration, remembering the past to inspire the future, with host Carrie Kim and guest Lacey Cannon, founder and executive director of Indigenous Regeneration, based out of San Diego County, California.
So, Lacey, we were speaking about language and the importance of reclaiming language to reconnect to our indigeneity, really for anybody. Are there any programs that you are specifically offering to help with language restoration?
Yeah, absolutely. I have two projects right now that we're highlighting. One is Chris Alvarado. Chris Alvarado is from the Waipuk Clan as well. He's a cousin of my kids. He is a master's graduate from SDSU. And his master's project there was something that we're calling the Birdsong Revitalization Project. Mm-hmm. And so bird songs are traditional songs that, some will say 14,000 years, some will say 16, some will say time memorial, but they're old songs that tell the story of how the creator died and pretty much kind of like instructions on how to be as humans. And mm-hmm. there's thousands of these songs, and it's something that's traditionally just been passed down orally and not something that's been recorded. But Chris, he's been a lead bird singer and training for over 30 years, collecting these songs of his teachers. And what he decided to do was to go in and catalog it and get permission from all of the families to be able to record the songs and create phonetic language lessons that break down what the songs are talking about and how to pronounce them. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to get behind his project and we sought out grant funding, and we ended up getting the MAT Access grant, which explores culture as a healing modality for substance abuse recovery, specifically opioid addiction. And so we've been building out language lessons on his website, which is thehumans.com, where anyone can access for free the songs and the lessons there. And part of that project as well has been we've gone in with film director Cyrus Sutton, and we've been doing an elders wisdom series where we've been interviewing different elders from the Kumeyaay Nation in San Diego around language revitalization, cultural revitalization, addiction, how culture helps with addiction. And we're launching those on a platform through thehumans.com, and it'll be linked through our website as well, indigenousregeneration.org.
Well, we know, it's such a key element, the language for anybody. So many of us don't speak our native languages wherever we come from, just with kind of the diaspora and all the things that have happened for many people. It's really imperative, especially with so few native speakers, especially with many indigenous peoples, that there's so many have died off or gone into the spirit realm.
Yeah, I loved the Elders video series as we've been filming it, listening to the perspectives, because that really is the perspective of, especially when COVID hit, it was like, wow, we lost a lot of elders. And also people really realized the importance of having access to things digitally. So it kind of came at a perfect time where during COVID, when we had to close campus for our weekly programming with the youth, we were able to shift into into a space creating programming online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think COVID really showed that to us, the importance of having the access. And so traditionally with birdsongs, you learn by going to funerals, and funerals are from sundown until sunup. And so, that there's beauty in the tradition, and there's reason why the tradition is there. And we're not trying to replace that tradition.
Right.
We're trying to also create access to be able to have additional resources, and for the families who aren't allowed to go do that, or for the kids who weren't raised that way, having access as an adult, and not even having to be Kumeyaay to access the songs. We're really adamant that they're for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is important to keep the language alive, and sometimes someone else is keeping the language alive of someone else's heritage. And that's what my kumu always says, it's important to be sharing the language in that sense, to keep it alive so that it's not a dead language, that it doesn't become extinct. It's
Absolutely.
well known. Yeah. You had mentioned a bit about opioid addiction. And then we also know it's well known that there are high rates of suicide and depression among many Native youth and modern youth in general. So especially there's so many assaults upon youth in the name of the pandemic now as well. Could you tell us about a little more about the farming apprentice program? And is it actually targeted or geared for youth to train them up?
So the farm apprenticeship program, I can speak to that. That's a little bit separate from the work within honestly, all of it works towards the opioid addiction, because it is the connection back to the land. It is the connection back to self that really helps with addiction. So the Tribal Farm Apprenticeship Program is something that we launched last year when we received a $93,000 grant through the San Diego Foundation for the COVID food relief program, where they said, go, I applied for that grant at the beginning of COVID, and it was like a second round of funding. It was a surprise. And they're like, go grow as much food as you possibly can. Wow. So we were like, well, let's not just grow the food. Let's create a program while we do it. And so that's where Sea and Soil came in as a valuable partner, and 1,000 Honey Farms in Grey Grease. And we were able to use the majority of the funding for the apprentices and for the supplies to launch a new quarter-acre farm, which is Paradise Farm, through the volunteer coordination of Sea and Soil and some of the partnerships that we had. So our first farm apprentices was Carol. She's Payam Pachon from Pechanga Reservation. She was just about the best farm apprentice we ever could have had on our first run around. And she spent 6 months with us installing the farm there and launching the program. So this year we've taken her feedback and we've received additional funding to kind of build upon that and build it out. And so in addition to our, the regenerative agriculture, our farming apprenticeship program is going to include what Richard Bugbee is calling land relationship. He's replacing land management with land relationship. And
I never liked that word. It never made sense to me.
Yeah, it speaks volumes, and we're incorporating traditional Kumeyaay ethnobotany. And Richard and I will be teaching workshops with, skills and plants. And then additionally, we're wrapping in curriculum that educates on cultural burning. So introducing fire and land management from the lens of using prescribed grazing with sheep and goats, and then coming behind and doing the cultural burning. And really educating around the difference between controlled burning and cultural burning and what that means when we have healthy ecosystems for plants. And so the apprentices are going to be trained up in a lot of different areas. And we have hopes in the future to expand it to beaver placement in the waterways in San Diego. You have to be a tribe to place beavers. We think it's a great opportunity for job development for tribes, and that it could really save the waterways in San Diego.
What did you say you need to be in order to place the beavers? I missed that.
You have to be from a tribe to be able to place beavers. Wow. That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. I love hearing that. That's music to my ears to hear that that's even happening. So, yeah. And so all those, all that you just spoke about is happening now, or it's underway now, or you're waiting?
It's underway right now. Yeah, we're about to start next week. We start with 2 new farm apprentices from the San Pasqual Reservation. We have 2 women. 2 survivors of domestic violence. One's legally blind. They both have a desire to go into product to market with native plants. So we're going to help support them and get behind them on working with Richard to develop a shampoo out of the yucca root with native plants and things to be able to have their own market, their own line. So
that's phenomenal. On one of the videos, you spoke about the vision for creating something akin to an Indigenous woofing network. And I was wondering if that's still something that's happening. Are you focused on doing that first in California and then expanding it across Turtle Island, or how do you envision it would work?
Yeah, it is something we're still working on. Definitely just to be honest, there was a large shift in all of my plans in life when I got divorced after 17 years. And so life is constantly recreating itself. So that being said, Paradise, where we're at now, Paradise Farms, it sits at the base of Rodriguez Mountain and Paradise Mountain, and it's at the base of thousands of acres of BLM land or public land. And there's hiking trails through there, and it's just a beautiful space. And so our goal is to build out a campus there at Paradise to be able to host overnights and have people come and learn and stay. And within San Diego County, we would like to start, the Kumeyaay Travel Ocean Mountain Desert. So having locations in those areas where we can trade between. But the goal would be to be a working model, so that we could go out and help tribes set up a space, that teaches the same things and has earth domes or some form of village housing, to where if my son graduates and he wants to go, learn about Oneida Nation and how they live on their reservation, he could sign up to go stay at their native wolfing program, where he could go stay in their village and learn about their culture and help tend the gardens. And if we could have enough of those across the country with tribes, then we would have tended gardens and food happening and cultural exchanges. And I think it could be a pretty cool thing. I think
it's amazing. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the ecosystem restoration camps, and that it's something sort of akin to this, but since that began, I always envisioned that there should be exactly what you're trying to create. It makes so much sense, to also connect the tribes and the different First Nations and just have restoration happening across Turtle Island.
Absolutely. And, a lot of tribes are doing really amazing things. That's really exciting. Exciting to see. And it's just about being able to amplify the voices that are already doing the work and putting the resources behind it. We don't need more companies coming in and telling, everybody what they need. It's about really helping people do it themselves.
Yeah. Or as your motto, remembering the past to inspire the future. Right. What have been some of the successes you focused on intertribal connectivity? And I'm wondering what some of the successes and also what some of the challenges have been in building that, or if you've encountered any.
Sure. Well, in San Diego County, we have a whole handful of different tribes. They're all part of the same nation. So it's been fairly easy for us to build intertribal connectivity in San Diego, because it's easy to throw out an invite to the Ed Center at Sequan, and most people that are there know everybody from San Pasqual or, Santa Isabel or wherever. We have been able to invite down, like at our Unite the Tribes concert that we had, we were able to bring down tribes from a few different areas, Bishop and some Tongbas from LA, to be able to come and kind of learn and be a part of things. But it's definitely something that we hope to grow, as we have the ability to host overnights. So this is the first time we've had a camp. We've had a couple camp outs at Matayum. We had 100 campers, and that was really lovely. We did a Kumeyaay cosmology camp out, and 100 campers came, and we had an elder that was, had the star pointer, and we had the telescopes out, and it was wonderful. But having the ability to have regular overnight stays on the land where you're farming and doing the activities is a game changer for us. So we're really excited about the new farm.
Yeah. And having that network, as you said, when it becomes solidified as a network, it'll just continue to grow.
Yeah.
With increasing momentum and actions taking place around the land back movement to return various public and private lands to Indigenous peoples, even as that's happening, there are still numerous landless tribes, First Nations without land or even proper access to their ancestral homelands. Are you working with any landless tribes now, or is there intent to help them reconnect to the land in general?
Gosh, it's so interesting you said that. Today I went and checked out the Compton Community Garden, and I was like, looking up, like what organizations are serving, the Tongva in the area, because it is, like an unrecognized tribe that's just intermixed in with the rest of everybody here. So I'm curious, to poke around, but I mean, Richard Bugby, he wants us to do some work with a couple of friends that he has from a couple of different tribes, but I'm pretty interested actually in the Tongva and exploring that more.
Right. I mean, I think there's so many, and there's just with everything that's gone on. I mean, so many tribes were virtually decimated and, as we know, got assimilated in, and we don't even know how many there originally were, how many different peoples actually roamed this land so long ago, which...
There's a great book called There. I can't remember the name of the artist. Have you heard of that book?
I don't know it, no.
He talks about being an urban Indian, not being raised on a res, and how, identity. And I think, I hear a lot of people struggle with that. And I think a lot of non-Native people struggle with that too, of like, what is our identity?
Right.
It's a tricky thing. And so that's a really great book where he breaks down, like finding your identity, even though you don't have certain things to claim.
Like culture. I mean, people talk about consumer culture, which I would say is not a culture at all, because culture is what sustains you. It's what sustains your spirit. It sustains your ancestry. And so, a lot of people are without really a cultural roots or heritage or traditions, and all of that binding them together, as the glue.
Yeah. And I love to tell, I also have a lot of, obviously, like, maybe everybody on the radio can't see what I look like, but, I'm very blonde hair, blue-eyed, Irish, German, dominant genes. And, for me, like, I don't just connect to my Cherokee and Chickasaw roots. I also very much so connect to my Irish roots, my German roots, my Slavic roots, and play around with the language and the cultures there as well. And that's something really everybody can do. Everybody knows a piece of where you come from, and anywhere in the world, there's what we would call pagan traditions, explore it. It's the same thing.
I know. It's getting back to the land. When we go back to anyone's cultural roots, you will find people were on the land. People were connected to the land. They were, it was natural to be animist or naturalist. That was just how we lived. Could you tell us about the upcoming exhibit featuring your regenerative design work with Payom Pachum elder Richard Bugby, whom you've spoken so highly of, at the Museum of Design in Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah. Nice pronunciation, by the way. Commend you on your... so Richard Bugby's and my design. So a lot of the designs we did, I mentioned already, the Elder's Medicine Path, the constructed wetlands, the Basket Weavers Trail, Matayum, and the Kumeyaay Food Forest. They were featured as part of an exhibit at the Museum of Design in Atlanta, Georgia, called Full Circle Design Without End, and it explores regenerative living concepts and how it like impacts us on the daily, I suppose, and different work and lines of work and things that are kind of working towards remedying that.
So is it mostly photographic or videos, or how are they actually exhibiting the work?
Those are currently in the museum right now. It's on exhibit until June. We made a few special videos for them. And then I believe I'll be going out to do some programming as well, kind of highlighting. So something we haven't spoken about is the board game, the Kumeyaay Ethnobotany board game that Richard Bugby and I have been making. And so the museum's pretty interested in that. And so I think we'll be going out to doing some programming out there for them before it ends.
Okay, we're going to take a break right here, Lacey, and we'll get back to talking a bit more about the Kumeyaay Ethnobotany board game when we come back.
Hey listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying EcoJustice Radio. We air every Monday at 9 a.m. on KPFT Houston and every Wednesday at 3 p.m. on KPFK Los Angeles. Stay connected by subscribing to EcoJustice Radio on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media. For an extended version of this interview as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. Today, you are listening to Indigenous Regeneration, remembering the past to inspire the future, with host Carrie Kim and guest Lacey Cannon, founder and executive director of Indigenous Regeneration, based out of San Diego County, California.
So, Lacey, you were speaking about the Kumeyaay Ethnobotany board game. If you could speak a bit more about that and what the purpose of the game is.
Absolutely. So I've been really blessed over the last 2.5-3 years to be creating a Kumeyaay ethnobotany board game with my elder, my Payampachon elder, Richard Bugby. He's a Kumeyaay ethnobotanist. He's fluent in Kumeyaay and trained under Jane Dumas for 35 years. Jane Dumas was Kumeyaay from San Diego, and she was like the plant lady. So his knowledge is just like this wealth of information around plants and the relationship with plants. And then my son, Levi, we have this game called Wildcraft that I had ordered, and we were playing it. And I just thought, God, this would be so cool if it was in Kumeyaay. And I snapped a picture of it and I sent it to Bugby, and he was instantly like, yes. And it was when he was being evacuated from Topanga Canyon fires.
Oh.
And I had sent him a copy of the board game and stuff. And he said the one thing he brought with him was the board game. So, and then COVID happened and we were like, let's shift into some online educational activities. And so we started creating the board game. And the board game is a map of San Diego and Baja without a border. It explores the original village sites of the Kumeyaay Nation and all of the original traveling trails. With it, it's all in Kumeyaay, and it's a cooperation game. So it breaks San Diego actually down into bioregions: coastal, valley, mountain, and desert. And when it does that, it really decolonizes the mind and the way that you look at the land and the relationship to the land. And so it's a cooperation game. And the goal is to bring as many resources back to share with the elders. And along the way, there's trading that takes place at things like Little Vero Valley, or what's called the Indian supermarket, places that would have been lush gathering sites, And along the way, you have ailments where maybe you have a bug bite or a fever and you have to collect plants. And so you learn the medicinal uses of the plants to be able to move ahead in the game. And then as you move along in the game, you also collect animal cards and primitive skills cards. And so perhaps you hit a waterway in San Diego and you have a Thule card. You can use a Thule card to build a boat and go down the river and skip a few. So we teach primitive skills, numbers, colors, directions, plant uses, animal meanings. So a lot of the cultural stories behind things, like for instance, if you get a coyote card, you have to go to the next village and lose a turn to play peon. And peon is traditionally played with coyote bones. So there's ways that we interweave the culture throughout the whole game. And you have to gather seasonally. So you learn what's gathered seasonally in which bioregion in San Diego. That just teaches a bunch of cool stuff.
It's phenomenal. I mean, I saw it and I was like, oh my God. I mean, I think you could really create this game for so many different First Nations across the continent, We
would like to actually... Yeah, thank you. And actually, Richard is really excited because he wants to do a Payampachon one next. And then I imagine we'll do more and more and more after that. But I'm down. Yeah. I could make board games the rest of my life.
I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing way to learn and teach and preserve all of the information.
Yes. I learned so much of the language. I've learned so much that, I thought I had learned a lot already, but just making the board game and cataloging his knowledge, I've just learned so much. And I'm just really excited to see how it integrates with players. So we're about to go to print with our first trial game, where we're going to be putting it out to all the different education centers within all the tribes in San Diego and having the kids play the games and give feedback on if the rules work or if they don't work,
Right. Actually play it and put it in action. It's exciting. I'm really excited to see the game because I was looking at it to see, and I wanted to ask you when it was coming out. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the eco-village vision of the earthen dome homes. You had created an earthen home prototype in 2018. And if you could speak more about the intent to teach natural building to Kumeyaay college students, just how the whole natural building piece is playing out.
Yeah. Darn COVID, right? It's always when you have steam on something that, COVID just kind of wiped the steam out of earth building. But the heart is still there for it. And the need really was cruising around on the res and seeing these dilapidated trailers and people just running their AC because it can't stay cool, and thinking about man, what's going to happen with climate change? These trailers are just going to get worse, and what kind of housing would be good on the reservation. And I fell in love with earth building, and we just decided to build a housing prototype to see, well, what would the cost be if we were to do this? What's the labor like if we do this? How could we run it through with like education at the community college so we have free labor and we're teaching the earth building and providing free homes on the reservation? And so we did build one dome, and it was a successful pilot program, and we got a lot of data from it, and and then COVID hit. So hopefully, now that things are opening up again, I really have a desire to continue on with doing housing alternatives for reservations with the materials that are present, which is when we say, looking at the past to inspire the future. Traditional Awaz, it's circular housing, and when we live inside of a circle, say it also shapes the way that we think about things versus living in a square. And so I love the earth domes because they come from, DG, which San Diego is just ample with. So we'll see what happens.
Right. Well, I'm happy to hear about that. And, we know that majority of the building that does go on is toxic. And so it's good to get people back in the earth. And also with all of the EMF that we're bombarded with, to be in the earth and home is a whole different reality.
Oh, yeah. No cell phone reception in there.
Just the sound,
I know. I tried to have my office in my dome. I was like, why can't I get a Wi-Fi signal?
You've mentioned, that Nako was one of the founding members of your board, Nako Bear, and there are other Native musicians and singers who have been involved with the org, and Chris Alvarado also is the bird singer. And how has having artists on your board and in the org influenced the programming and the projects?
Yeah, well, how can you have a community gathering without food and music? It's part of traditional ways, and it's part of all of our ways today. That's what makes a good party. So,
exactly. Well, you started with one, right? That's how you kind of were birthed.
That's right. So I like music parties, and so do other people. It's a great way to raise money. It's a great way to bring the community together. It influences us in a way of keeping things fun.
Yeah, it's unifying. Is the Res Rocks Amphitheater project also still moving forward? If you could speak about that, if it is.
So Res Rocks Amphitheater will have to be something if the tribe decides to take over that. I released my lease on March 17th from Marayum, where the natural rock formations were right there, where I saw having a Res Rock Amphitheater. Mm-hmm. But, that being said, I really hope they do follow through with that. It's just Marayum ended up being, how can I say it in a sensitive way? Culturally sensitive when digging 3 inches below the surface of the land. So sometimes you start a community garden and it has to be moved.
Got it. Just because of like burial sites or sacred sites that are there. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Could you tell a bit more about that Unite the Tribe concert that kind of launched a lot of the IRG in general? That was in 2019, right?
Yes. That was my first outdoor concert of that size that I've produced. It was just bringing together our friends, really. Damien was on our board. He does stage production. Nako's on the board, so he came to perform. My ex was a musician. He came to perform. We were getting ready to do the ribbon cutting at the Elders Medicine Path and the constructed wetlands, and we just said, let's just do it. So Shutescott came, and we rented a large stage, and we brought in vendors and booths and environmental information and food, and we had a big res party. We had over 1,000 people show up.
Were you knowing, I know you're enrolled in the Cherokee Nation, and I was wondering, but you're also Chickasha. Were you raised knowing your traditions, your native traditions?
I just want to correct on that. I'm awaiting enrollment with the Cherokee Nation. It's a long wait.
Okay.
My grandpa's family is on the rolls, but my grandpa, I didn't meet him until 3 years ago.
Mm.
I was actually raised on burial ground up in Washington, of a completely different nation. And I was not raised with the knowledge of being Chickasaw or Cherokee, actually. And although I was raised in a lot of traditional ways, just because that's how my parents were, my dad was very into primitive skills, and my mom was, about working the land and doing the plants and stuff. It wasn't really until actually, it's been 4 years ago now that it came out that my mom had a different dad. She found it at 62. Okay. And that's my grandpa Bill, and he's still alive. And I've been able to spend the last 4 years getting to know him and getting to know about those roots on that side of the family. And for me, it was kind of really healing and a wonderful surprise, because here I had been drawn my whole life towards a lot of these ways and working in the community and then marrying into a tribe. And it was a big surprise for me to find out that we were on the rolls there and that I was actually Native. It's been a beautiful thing for me too, learning a lot of the traditions, because things that matter to me are things that actually were cultural that I didn't even know that connection was there, but it was just rooted in me.
I understand. Well, it makes sense. The things that you're drawn to, obviously there's some kind of a deeper thread. I was wondering if you could speak about your time on the reservation there. You lived there almost 2 decades, and how that impacted the way you relate to and understand life. I mean, was it any different than being in San Juan Islands, or, was there something different that you learned there by being there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say I was married in for 17 years, but we only lived there for 10. And so there was a big difference in the last 10 years of being on the reservation, being off. And mostly it's just like access to family. So you're just around a lot of family, and, it's relationship. And through relationship, you learn different things. And yeah, it was a very different way of thinking, and it was a very different culture, for me.
I was wondering if your sons, because you have 2 Kumeyaay sons, whether they are close to their traditional ways, and how you are, how it is you don't live there now, and how it is to raise them, and if they're remaining connected to their cultural roots and life ways.
Well, the divorce has been hard on them, but I felt so proud in my heart. Like 3 months ago, probably, my oldest son, who's 14, came to me and said that he was really, struggling. All his friends were smoking weed, and he's, struggling with anger because of everything we've gone through. And that he was wondering, that he was listening over one of my Zoom calls. And it was one of the community surveys that we were doing as part of Chris Alvarado's Birdsong project. And in it, there was Raul Chrisman who was speaking, and he was talking about bird and the traditional way of learning and why. And, that it's important for the person that wants to learn bird to go to the teacher and to ask. And my son came to me and he said, I heard that, and I'd like to ask, I think I want to see if this will help me. I want to see if it'll help me so I don't smoke weed with my friends. I want to become a bird singer.
Wow. Amazing. Nice. Yeah. Bumps on that, actually.
So I have moments like that. And then, of course, Richard Bugby lives on the land at Paradise Farm, where I live with my boys. And so they have access to him. And so Levi, my youngest, he just loves the plants, he likes to walk around and pick and smell and all of that stuff. But they still also have access to the res. They go visit their dad, and there's the Ed Center still, and they're involved in tribal sports and things, So I'm very close to the reservation and still involved. Because it's important to me that they're raised in those ways, a lot of us didn't get to have that connection where you're with your family members who have all been together for, forever, even if the land there that they're at isn't the original village, it's still the family. It's about the family.
You're being held together by that. Sure. Do you have any comments about intergenerational connectivity? And I'm assuming that that's just naturally part of the org, because you are seeing everything is really coming through an Indigenous cosmological view. But I wonder if you could speak about that, the preservation of intergenerational connection.
Absolutely. I mean, I just always love seeing the little kids, in diapers running around in the garden next to the elders, and it's like, it's just important, and we lose that in so many parts of American culture, the connection to our elders. And it's just so important to have that wisdom and that patience, and mostly for, I think, our youth to be able to trust and feel that they can trust other adults that aren't their parents, and to hold respect for them. I think that those are really good traditions to pass down, and I've respected that about the res. I want my kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think that children that are raised in those kinds of situations close to relatives, they grow up differently because they feel more cared for, because you have a village to be able to turn to, just your immediate parents,
Absolutely. And, it tells the brain to think as we, not I. And I think that's very important.
Yeah. Could you share how listeners can stay in contact with you and how they can also support your efforts? I know, you are a nonprofit, so there's always obviously fundraising to be had and grants to write and so on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We're at that tipping point trying to scale because I wear like 12 hats,
Right.
Anyone that knows the nonprofit game knows how tiring it can be. So all support is welcomed in any form. Of course, monetary donations is amazing. It can be done at our website, indigenousregeneration.org. We also have forms on there to sign up and come volunteer. There's space for everybody to get involved in whatever capacity, and we welcome it all. If you want to come be on the farm, that's great. If you want to volunteer by doing website updates, that's great. If you want to, volunteer coordinators, we need all kinds of help. So please reach out. You can contact me through there. It's me who gets the emails. I may be slow replying. If you'd like to be the person that gets emails and helps me reply faster, definitely reach out.
I like that last little plug. Lacey, thank you so much for all that you're bringing to the world and to community and to the youth and to the elders, everyone in between. We thank you so much for your service and for your commitment to reigniting all of this tribal wisdom and spreading it further across the lands.
Well, thank you. It's an honor, and I'm humbled, and I'm grateful that I get to do it every day. So thank you.
Hey, listeners, if you want to check out the extended recording of this show, go to wherever you stream your podcast or our website, EcoJusticeRadio.org. Thank you to our guest, Lacey Cannon, founder and executive director of Indigenous Regeneration. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. This has been Indigenous Regeneration, remembering the past to inspire the future. Please connect with us on social media at EcoJustice Radio, SoCal 350, and Adventures in Waste. If you like what you heard and you want others to be informed, well, you know what to do. Subscribe to the podcast, share the episodes, and get that knowledge out there. You have been listening to EcoJustice Radio on KPFK Los Angeles and KPFT Houston, a project of SoCal 350. The show can be heard on kpfk.org, kpft.org, all major podcast apps, and at ecojusticeradio.org. Created by Mark and JP Morse, executive producer Jack Ite, producer and co-host Jessica Aldridge, co-host Carrie Kim, and engineer and original music by Blake Wake Beats. And until next time, remember, the power is yours.